I stood on the edge of the towering royal clock tower, the raging storm nearly tearing my thin dress apart. This was my second life. The suffocating memory of freezing and starving to death in the snow still haunted my every breath. I no longer believed in love, only power and gold. Rowan sneered, ripping our royal marriage contract into pieces. The wax-sealed scraps hit my face like icy blades. Instead of falling to my knees in tears, I pulled a thick parchment ledger from my corset and smiled. 5 years of my youth, emotional damages, and my family's financial investments, I shouted over the roaring thunder, slamming the wet paper against his chest. You owe me 30,000 gold coins. Rowan, pay up! His face twisted in humiliation. He drew his royal broadsword, pressing the sharp tip right against my throat. You dare threaten the crown prince? You wretched woman? I didn't flinch. I reached up and gripped the sharp steel blade bare-handed. Warm blood dripped down the fuller. While he stood paralyzed by my killing intent, I aggressively snatched the gold-embroidered royal purse from his belt. Consider this the interest, I whispered, turning my back and marching into the violent storm. However, when I finally pushed open the heavy brass doors of my family's grand estate, my blood ran cold. The foyer was in absolute ruins, and 3 heavy steel crossbows were pressed firmly against my loyal Uncle Arthur's trembling neck. I kicked the mahogany doors hard enough to shatter the hinges, sending splinters flying into the dim, dusty council hall. The corrupt estate managers were laughing, literally resting their boots near my loyal Uncle Arthur's head as they divided our family's wealth. I hurled the blood-stained royal purse onto the long table. The heavy thud and the spill of shining gold instantly silenced the room. Lock the doors, Harris, I commanded my butler, who stood rigidly behind me. I slammed my thick, blood-stained ledger onto the wood, tearing apart their pathetic lies. You have embezzled our territory's taxes and driven commoners to their graves, I declared, my voice echoing off the stone walls. You are all finished. Brailer, the bloated head official, refused to yield. He flipped the massive oak table with a furious roar, sending gold and parchment crashing to the floor. You are just a discarded princess. We are taking this territory today. I casually drew a poison-laced throwing knife from the holster strapped to my thigh, tossing down the ultimate proof of their treason with an enemy nation. Brailer's face twisted in pure terror. Like a rabid dog, he snatched a shattered, jagged glass bottle of poisoned wine from the floor. He lunged across the ruined furniture, driving the venomous glass spike straight toward my carotid artery. The jagged glass halted a mere millimeter from my eye. A large hand clamped around Brailer's wrist like an iron vise. Nathan, a tall man I had never seen in my past life, stood beside me with a gentle smile. He twisted his grip, and a sickening crunch echoed through the hall. Brailer shrieked in agony as his bones snapped, hot blood splattering across my cheek. I coldly stepped over Brailer's whimpering body, banishing every corrupt official from my lands forever. There was no time to rest. I wrapped myself in a dark cloak and descended into the capital's rotting underground slums. The tavern reeked of cheap ale and fresh blood. I found Rig, the king of the Shadow Network, counting coins. When I demanded to buy intelligence, he swiftly drew a dagger and pressed it to my stomach. A noble lady shouldn't play in the dark, he mocked. Drawing on the ruthless survival instincts of my past life, I violently twisted his arm, reversed the blade, and stabbed it straight through his collar, pinning him to a moldy pillar. I leaned in close, whispering the hidden name of his secret daughter. Rig's pupils dilated in absolute terror. Trembling, he handed me an encrypted scroll. I broke the wax and unfurled it. My breath caught as I stared at a magical projection photograph. My best friend Edie passionately kissing Rowan naked in the royal gardens. I shoved the magical photograph directly into the roaring flames of the wall torch. The ghostly blue fire instantly consumed their deceitful faces, the burning ash searing the back of my hand, but I couldn't stop my dark, victorious laughter. The heavy office doors creaked open. Edie rushed in, her eyes brimming with fake, theatrical tears as she lunged to embrace me. Playing the victim, she claimed she was forced into her actions and presented a dazzling, starry blue couture gown as an apology. As she unfurled the silk, my sharp senses immediately caught a faint acidic scent of ozone. It was an alchemical fire powder, a deadly substance that would ignite into a blazing inferno the second it touched human sweat. "Thank you, you are too kind," I lied, forcing out a few tears. I hugged her tightly, covertly rubbing the venomous powder deep into the hem of her own extravagant skirts. Once her smug, retreating footsteps faded down the hall, my expression turned to solid ice. I glanced at my loyal butler standing in the shadows. "Harris, infiltrate the Count's estate tonight. Swap this poisoned gown directly into Edie's wardrobe. I want to watch her burn herself alive." Before Harris could bow, the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows of my office shattered inward with explosive force. The storm howled through the room as a lavishly dressed woman stepped over the jagged glass, bringing the thunder with her. A deafening crack echoed through the room as my biological mother, Sylvia, lashed her diamond-encrusted riding crop against my terrified maid's back. Blood splattered across my pristine silk carpet. She shrieked over the howling wind, demanding I hand over every coin of the family's wealth and crawl back to Rowan on my knees. Staring at the woman who had callously pushed me to starvation in my past life, pure murderous intent churned in my stomach. As the barbed whip descended a second time, I lunged forward and grabbed the leather midair. The sharp thorns sliced into my palm, but I didn't blink. With my free hand, I forcefully slammed a stack of soaked parchment right into her heavily powdered face. "Read it," I growled. They were undeniable. Sealed documents proving her treasonous affair with an enemy count. Sylvia's arrogant facade instantly crumbled into panic. Screaming like a madwoman, she lunged forward to strangle me and destroy the evidence. I swiftly kicked her knee, driving her backward until I pinned her upper body firmly against the jagged edge of the shattered window. Half of her torso dangled precariously over the stormy abyss. "I sever my bloodline with you today. Leave the capital by midnight, or I turn these in," I commanded coldly. Pushed to the absolute brink, Sylvia let out a hysterical laugh. She suddenly drew a razor-sharp steel dagger from her tight corset and plunged it straight toward my heart. The venomous dagger missed my heart by a fraction of an inch. Harris materialized from the shadows, delivering a brutal kick that snapped Sylvia's wrist with a loud crack. The blade embedded itself deep into the wall. I ordered Harris to drag her into the freezing storm like a stray dog. Hours later, the grand doors of the royal banquet hall swung open. I stepped into the blinding light of 1,000 crystal chandeliers, draped in a custom-made silver starlight gown. The breathtaking radiance of the fabric instantly silenced the mocking whispers of the aristocracy. The orchestra began to play. Rowan, desperate to humiliate me publicly, grabbed my wrist with bruising force and dragged me onto the marble dance floor. Amidst the violent spins of the waltz, he smirked and maliciously thrust his heavy riding boot forward, intending to trip me during the music's climax to make me a laughingstock. Instead of dodging, I used his own momentum. I dropped my center of gravity, hooked my ankle behind his supporting leg, and executed a flawless, aggressive shoulder throw. The crown prince flew through the air, crashing spectacularly into a towering crystal champagne pyramid. Glass shattered like rain, and Rowan groaned in a pool of blood and expensive wine as the entire hall descended into horrified silence. The crowd parted. Nathan walked slowly toward me, a dark smile on his face, and extended his black-gloved hand. I firmly grasped Nathan's hand, and we instantly launched into a highly aggressive, predatory Telendrian war dance right in the center of the hall. Our footsteps locked in a lethal rhythm, our eyes challenging each other in a fierce battle of dominance. The suffocating aura we projected completely overshadowed the pathetic, bleeding crown prince dragging himself off the floor. Standing at the edge of the crowd, Edie's eyes were bloodshot with rabid jealousy. Desperate to reclaim the spotlight, she proudly pushed her way forward wearing the exact starry blue couture dress I had secretly swapped into her closet. Her intense rage and the stifling heat of the room caused her to sweat profusely. The moment her acidic perspiration soaked into the silk, the hidden alchemical white phosphorus violently reacted. "Ah!" Edie released a blood-curdling scream as thick blue flames erupted from her hemline, instantly climbing to her collarbones. She thrashed wildly on the polished marble, the horrific stench of burning flesh filling the grand hall. Rowan desperately lunged to extinguish the blaze, burning his own hands to blistered ruins. Writhing in agonizing pain, her once beautiful face charred, Edie raised a blackened finger and pointed directly at me. "She cursed me! Seize her!" she shrieked. In the blink of an eye, the terrifying metallic screech of 100 royal broadswords echoed through the room, the heavy blades forming a deadly steel cage around me. Hundreds of cold steel tips hovered a mere half-inch from my throat, yet I didn't even blink. I calmly picked up a glass of red wine from a nearby table and took a slow sip. Suddenly, a loud explosive crack shattered the tension. Queen Anna had forcefully crushed a solid gold goblet in her bare hand. "Step back, all of you!" her voice roared, trembling with absolute authority. The fierce, protective queen marched down from the dais and delivered a brutally resounding slap to Rowan's face, sending him sprawling to the floor. Ignoring the gasps of the court, she unclasped the legendary deep-sea sapphire necklace from her own neck, the ultimate symbol of royal inheritance, and fastened it securely around mine. "This girl is my only true daughter," Queen Anna declared, her gaze daring anyone to challenge her. Seeing this ultimate betrayal, the severely burned Edie vomited a mouthful of dark blood and collapsed entirely onto her stretcher. I had won the room, but a sudden bone-chilling dread crawled up my spine. I abruptly looked up, my gaze piercing through the sea of aristocrats, directly meeting the eyes of King Richard seated on the elevated Iron Throne. There was no outward anger in his gaze, only the terrifying, suffocating emptiness of a predator looking at a corpse. Slowly, deliberately, the absolute tyrant raised his wine glass in a silent, chilling toast. My survival instincts screamed, the massacre was beginning tonight. The exact second King Richard's wine glass touched his lips, all 10,000 giant candles in the banquet hall violently extinguished into pitch blackness. A fraction of a heartbeat later, a terrifying screech tore through the air. A heavy armor-piercing crossbow bolt grazed my scalp, entirely shattering the solid marble pillar right behind me into deadly shrapnel. "Move!" Nathan commanded. He grabbed my waist and forcefully tackled me through a massive decorative tapestry, sending us tumbling down into the dusty, cobweb-covered royal catacombs beneath the palace. There was no time to breathe. The king's elite shadow guards silently swarmed into the pitch-black tunnels behind us like relentless ghosts. It was too narrow for ranged weapons. I instantly drew my twin daggers, and Nathan fought barehanded. We engaged in a brutal, suffocating close-quarters bloodbath. Hot blood and sparks sprayed across the ancient brick walls as we violently snapped limbs and slashed throats in the absolute dark. Stepping over the mutilated corpses of the assassins, we finally kicked open the iron grate of the sewer, plunging into the freezing, torrential rain outside. Rig was already there, aggressively drifting a heavy, iron-reinforced black carriage through the deep mud. I reached out for the carriage door handle, relief flooding my chest, when a sickening whistle sliced through the storm. A black arrow, dripping with glowing green venom, was flying with lethal precision straight toward Nathan's exposed back. "Get down!" I screamed, pushing my physical limits as I shoved Nathan violently out of the projectile's path. The poisoned arrow tore through my left arm and embedded itself deeply into the carriage wood. Thick, venomous blood instantly stained my gown. Seeing my blood, Nathan's gentle facade completely shattered. His eyes darkened into a terrifying, abyssal rage. He hauled me into the armored carriage as Rig cracked the whip, smashing through the royal barricades and roaring into the stormy night. As the heavy carriage violently bounced over the mud, Nathan ripped his silk shirt to aggressively bind my bleeding wound. An apocalyptic aura of murder rolled off him. He grabbed his sword, ready to turn the carriage around and slaughter his way straight to the king's throne. "Stop!" I gasped, swallowing the coppery taste of the spreading poison, and grabbed his collar with my uninjured hand. Slicing his throat is far too merciful. I am going to obliterate his entire empire. Fighting through excruciating pain, I reached out the broken window with blood-stained fingers and pulled the trigger of a brass tube. A brilliant red alchemical flare shot into the sky, exploding magnificently against the storm clouds. This was the signal. By dawn, my hidden guilds would freeze every single royal vault. I stared at the receding palace towers, a bloody smile creeping across my face. "You failed to kill me. Richard, now I am coming for your crown." The crimson light of my alchemical flare had barely faded from the stormy clouds when the heavy oak doors of my safe house were violently kicked open. 30 heavily armored debt collectors flooded my foyer, their steel boots grinding my expensive porcelain into dust. Sir Matchins, a notoriously ruthless baron, arrogantly marched forward and slammed a blood-stained, magically locked parchment directly onto my dining table. "Hand over your territory or I will send you to hell." Matchins unleashed a greedy, maniacal laugh. This was King Richard's ultimate backup plan. The Baron had resurrected a massive, 5-year-old high-interest loan my family once owed, inflating the penalty until it could buy my entire dukedom. The mercenaries immediately drew their heavy broadswords, forming a lethal cage of serrated steel around my chair. One wrong word and they would butcher me into pieces. Facing the deadly blades, I didn't even blink. I calmly used a pristine white napkin to wipe a drop of spilled tea from my knuckles. I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. Without a sound, Harris dropped from the ceiling rafters like a shadow, holding a massive black iron chest. He slammed it down right onto Matchins's armored toes, cracking the floorboards beneath them. "Open it," I whispered, my voice dripping with absolute zero frost. "Look closely at your own execution." Matchins sneered and kicked the latch open, but the moment he looked inside, his pupils shrank to the size of pinpricks. The moment the heavy iron lid snapped back, hundreds of crimson wax-sealed magical deeds violently erupted outward, slapping Matchins directly across his horrified face. They were not just random papers. They were the absolute foreclosure documents for his personal mansions. his trading fleets, and every single copper coin attached to his aristocratic name. I stepped up onto the dining table, looking down at his trembling frame like a descending goddess of wealth. "You are bankrupt, Matchins," I declared, my voice echoing like a death knell. "No, this is impossible! Where did you get the limitless gold to buy all my creditors?" He shrieked hysterically, clutching his chest. Seeing their invincible master instantly reduced to a beggar, his heavily armored mercenaries dropped their broadswords in sheer panic and fled out the shattered door. Matchins didn't know I was the shadow owner of the Prosperity Guild, controlling 80% of the Empire's luxury silk trade. He thought he was hunting a rabbit, completely unaware he had walked into a dragon slaughterhouse. His knees buckled. He collapsed into the broken glass, sobbing and smashing his forehead against the floor until blood blurred his vision, begging me to spare his wife and children. I stared at his pathetic form, remembering how the aristocracy had watched me starve in the snow. Just as I opened my mouth to pronounce his eternal exile, a terrifying equine shriek pierced the storm outside. A lavish royal broadsword violently exploded through the stained glass window, aiming straight for my skull. Glass shrapnel rained down as a massive armored warhorse crashed through the window. Rowan sat atop the beast, pulling the leather reins while pointing his royal broadsword a mere inch from my eyes. His face was twisted in a mixture of desperate rage and absolute arrogance. Reaching into his soaked gold-embroidered tunic, he pulled out a gaudy, oversized ruby ring and thrust it toward my face. "Put this on immediately." "Lyanna!" Rowan roared over thunder. "By the king's absolute decree, our marriage contract is reinstated." I looked at this pathetic fool and almost laughed out loud. The king was forcing him to chain me back to the royal family because my wealth was now a terrifying threat. Instead of showing remorse, Rowan lifted his chin haughtily. "Once you wear the ring, you will be my official wife. But my true love, Edie, will live in the palace as my favorite mistress. You should weep with gratitude for my mercy." His boundless audacity ignited the suppressed fury of my 2 lifetimes. Instead of retreating from the lethal steel, I aggressively stepped forward and grabbed the sharp blade of his broadsword barehanded. Warm blood instantly flowed down my fingers, dripping onto his leather boots. Rowan gasped in horror at the psychotic killing intent burning in my eyes. Before he could pull the weapon back, I grabbed his horse's bridle with my other hand and yanked downward with explosive force, sending the beast rearing wildly into the air. Rowan shrieked like a slaughtered pig as his gold-embroidered body was violently launched through the air, slamming heavily onto the unforgiving cobblestones outside my manor. The gaudy ruby ring bounced into the muddy gutter. I pulled a poison throwing knife from my thigh holster, stepping out into the rain to press the venomous tip right against his bleeding throat. "Go back and tell your tyrannical father," I whispered, a demonic smile curling my lips. "If he wants my hand, he will have to sever it from my cold, dead corpse." Humiliated beyond sanity, Rowan spat a mouthful of bloody mud and aggressively reached for the hidden dagger at his waist to stab my calf. Before his fingers even brushed the hilt, Harris materialized from the shadows. The impeccably dressed butler stomped his polished leather shoe directly onto the crown prince's hand. The sickening crunch of shattering metacarpals echoed clearly over the storm. With a flawless professional smile, Harris effortlessly hoisted the screaming prince by his collar. "Trash belongs in the refuse bin, Your Highness," Harris stated elegantly, violently kicking Rowan directly into an open vat of boiling, foul-smelling alchemical fertilizer waiting in the courtyard. Rowan thrashed helplessly in the bubbling, acidic mud, his royal dignity utterly obliterated. Before I could even enjoy the spectacle, my terrified maid Leah came sprinting out of the manor, her face smeared with black soot. "My lady, run! Your entire grand wardrobe has been set on fire." I brutally kicked open the scorching oak door, instantly gagging on the suffocating stench of thick smoke and corrosive acid. Every single custom gown in my expansive dressing room had been sadistically slashed to ribbons, the luxurious fabrics dissolving into bubbling green slime before catching fire. Through the roaring flames, I spotted a scrap of distinctive white lace snagged on the window frame. Edie. The venomous snake had snuck in during the chaos, hoping to destroy my reputation by forcing me to attend the king's deadly banquet in rags. Leah fell to her knees, weeping hysterically through the smoke as she clawed at the ruined silks. If I missed the royal banquet, the king would use my absence as an excuse to declare me a traitor and execute my family. I didn't panic. I casually crushed a burning ember beneath my heel and walked to the deepest corner of the burning room, pressing my bloody palm against a hidden magical rune. A heavy titanium vault hissed open, releasing a wave of freezing, iridescent magical energy. Inside hung the abyssal starlight, a masterpiece woven from ultra-rare Telendrian night silk that glowed like a trapped galaxy. I slipped into the breathtaking gown, the fabric molding to my skin like icy armor. I looked like an apocalyptic empress ascending from the ashes. I pushed open the manor doors, my eyes locked onto Nathan waiting in the storm. "Prepare the carriage," I ordered coldly. "It is time to crush their remaining pride." Before my foot even touched the carriage step, Rig materialized from the torrential rain like a bleeding ghost, his hands violently slamming against the window glass. "Do not go to the banquet." The shadow broker hacked up a mouthful of blood. "The king's elite assassin legion has already surrounded the district. It's a slaughtering trap." His warning was immediately punctuated by a terrifying mechanical screech. Dozens of enchanted flaming crossbow bolts rained down from the sky, instantly incinerating the courtyard gates behind us. "Drive! Head straight for the Tylandrian border!" I roared over the explosions. Nathan seized the reins, cracking the whip with explosive force. Our heavy, iron-reinforced carriage tore through the muddy mountain pass, drifting aggressively around deadly cliff edges. Behind us, 50 heavily armored Royal Black cavalrymen rode nightmare steeds, relentlessly firing armor-piercing bolts that shredded our outer steel plating. Death chased us by mere inches through the violent night. As the stormy dawn finally broke, we approached the border crossing. However, my heart plummeted. The checkpoint was completely barricaded by thousands of Tylandrian royal heavy halberdiers. Their massive spears formed an impenetrable steel wall, pointing directly at our exhausted horses. "Trespassers will be executed on sight," the imposing border general bellowed, raising his executioner's sword. Nathan calmly stood up on the driver's bench. With a single, fluid motion, he violently ripped off his torn, rain-soaked black cloak, exposing the gleaming mithril armor beneath. "Loose the arrows!" the border general roared, but his command was instantly obliterated by a voice that carried the terrifying weight of absolute authority. "Hold your fire!" Nathan bellowed, his voice echoing like thunder over the muddy valley. The morning sun finally sliced through the dark storm clouds, perfectly illuminating the supreme royal crest of Tylandria, etched into his mithril breastplate. The gentle, quiet companion who had eaten street food with me was completely gone, replaced by a terrifying, dominant crown prince whose very gaze demanded submission. The arrogant border general went pale as a sheet. A deafening, metallic earthquake shook the ground as 1,000 heavily armored soldiers simultaneously dropped to one knee, their weapons lowered in absolute reverence. "Welcome home, Prince Nathaniel!" the army roared in unison. Seeing this terrifying display of military might, the pursuing Retirand black cavalrymen at our rear immediately yanked their reins and fled back into the shadows like terrified rats. Nathan turned around, his intense, golden eyes locking onto mine through the shattered carriage window. He extended his bruised hand, his expression softening only for me. "Welcome to my empire, Liana," he whispered. But peace was a luxury I could not afford. The moment our carriage wheels crossed into the Grand Capitol Plaza, a blinding, crackling energy whip violently lashed out from the crowd, entirely shattering the cobblestones less than an inch from my face. Lethal cobblestone shards exploded toward my face as the crackling energy whip retracted like a venomous snake. Standing in our path was Lady Rose, an arrogant duke's daughter, wearing a massive crimson dress. Her eyes burned with rabid jealousy as she stared at me beside her prince. "Why is there a filthy foreign peasant hiding in your carriage?" Rose shrieked, pointing her glowing weapon at my nose. "Get out and crawl back to your slums." Nathan's golden eyes instantly frosted with murderous intent, his hand dropping to his sword hilt. I gently pressed my hand against his chest, stopping him. I stepped down from the carriage alone, my starlight gown trailing through the mud. Seeing my silent approach, Rose's face contorted with malice. She viciously swung the high-voltage whip straight toward my cheek, intending to disfigure me in front of the Capitol. Before the lethal sparks could touch my skin, I flicked my wrist. A poisoned throwing knife tore through the air like a shooting star. Thwack! The blade perfectly grazed Rose's wrist, pinning the lethal whip deeply into the wooden pillar behind her. Electrical sparks exploded around her head. Rose screamed, collapsing in sheer terror. I slowly walked over, looking into her trembling eyes. "Before you bark in someone else's yard, figure out who holds the blade. I will see you at the banquet." 1,000 crystal chandeliers ignited simultaneously, casting a blinding, opulent glow over the grand Tylandrian banquet hall. The moment I stepped through the gilded doors, the abyssal starlight gown worked its magic. The fabric shimmered like a trapped galaxy, instantly reducing every other aristocratic woman to a dull shadow. The whispers of the court shifted from mockery to absolute awe. Unable to bear her defeat, Lady Rose stomped forward, blocking my path to the table. She held a crystal glass filled with a violently bubbling, purple liquid. "According to our sacred traditions, a new guest must drink the welcoming toast," she sneered, holding the highly volatile poison to my face. This specific venom was designed to destroy the nervous system, making the victim rave like a lunatic within seconds. From the high table, Nathan's face turned lethal, and he pushed his chair back to intervene. I didn't blink. I reached out, firmly grasping Rose's trembling wrist, and guided the glass to my lips. While staring dead into her terrified eyes, I drank the entire cup of poison. Rose's eyes lit up with malicious glee, waiting for me to collapse. 10 seconds passed. My mind remained flawlessly sharp. I snatched the bottle of venom from the servant's tray, filled a massive gold goblet to the brim, and slammed it onto the table. I am still thirsty, I smiled demonically. Drink it all. The heavy gold goblet slammed against the table with a deafening metallic clang, causing Rose to stumble backward in absolute terror. Just as the entire court gasped at my impossible immunity to the venom, a violent crash echoed from the high table. Nathan violently flipped a silver platter of roasted meats into the air. His eyes were bloodshot, his movements heavily erratic as he staggered through the stunned crowd like a madman. He aggressively grabbed my wrist, pulling me away from the terrified Rose and dragging me out into the shadowy corridors. "Stop him! The prince has gone mad at wine!" The royal guards shouted in panic. Nathan kicked open the heavy brass doors of the deserted, freezing royal kitchen, pinning me forcefully against the marble countertop. His massive frame trapped me, radiating intense heat and the sharp smell of alcohol. Assuming the poison had somehow infected him, my hand instantly dropped to the hidden dagger at my thigh. But before I could strike, his terrifying aura vanished. Nathan collapsed forward, burying his face deep into the crook of my neck, inhaling my scent like a dying man finding air. He wasn't drunk at all. With incredibly gentle, trembling hands, he turned on the icy faucet and began washing the microscopic droplets of poison from my fingers. He whispered his deepest, agonizing guilt over his brother's murder, shedding a single tear onto my skin. Just as I reached out to hold him, the kitchen doors were violently kicked open. Thunder split the night sky outside the kitchen windows as the brass doors rebounded off the stone walls. Edie stood in the doorway, drenched by the storm. Her lace dress was deliberately torn at the shoulder, exposing the angry red burn scars covering her collarbones. "Your Highness, save me," she sobbed theatrically, launching herself like a leech toward Nathan's broad chest. Liana forged evidence to hunt me down in our homeland. Before she could collide with him, I snatched a massive steel cleaver from the butcher's block. Clang! I slammed the flat side of the heavy blade right into the center of her chest, stopping her dead in her tracks. I twisted my wrist, aiming at the razor-sharp edge a millimeter from her nose. Seeing my lethal gaze, Edie instantly pivoted her strategy. She fell to her knees, looking past us toward the Telendrian king who had just arrived with his guards. "Your Majesty, this woman is a spy for King Richard," Edie shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She is planning to poison your entire royal family." The old king's eyes narrowed with deadly suspicion. Before Nathan could roar in my defense, I kicked over a barrel of flour and grabbed a fistful of Edie's wet hair, yanking her head back. "If I were a spy," I whispered with a demonic smile, "I would just kill you right now." I raised the heavy steel cleaver high into the air. The exact microsecond my heavy steel blade plummeted downward. Nathan's warm, calloused hand clamped like a vice over the dull edge of the cleaver. His golden eyes were entirely devoid of his usual warmth, replaced by a terrifying, apocalyptic blizzard of rage. He didn't even look at my blade. He stared at Edie as if she were a rotting corpse. With one hand, he violently grabbed her by the back of her ruined dress, dragging her kicking and screaming across the marble floor. "Get this disgusting filth out of my sight!" Nathan's roar shook the kitchen walls. He hurled her out the doors, sending her tumbling down the grand stairs directly into the freezing mud. "Banish her from Telendria forever!" Edie clawed at the mud, her face twisting into a demonic mask of pure, unadulterated hatred and jealousy. Before the guards could drag her away, the colorful stained glass window at the end of the hall exploded inward with a deafening crash. A Telendrian scout riding a dying horse collapsed onto the floor. 3 black armor-piercing arrows were deeply embedded in his spine. "Your Highness, border attack. Redoran's ghost assassins." The scout coughed up black blood before going limp. While the room erupted into military panic, a small brass message cylinder rolled out from the scout's saddlebag. Stopping at my feet, I picked it up. Inside was a blood-soaked parchment, written by my personal maid back in my homeland. My heart stopped beating. My fingers trembled violently as I crushed the brass cylinder, unrolling the blood-drenched parchment containing my maid's desperate final words. "Flee! The queen is imprisoned! The king is slaughtering your entire family!" The coppery stench of blood hit my nose, and my vision instantly tunneled. Nathan drew his royal broadsword, immediately commanding 3,000 heavy cavalrymen to intercept the assassins at the border. He turned to me. his golden eyes burning with fierce devotion. "Stay in the palace. I will return and make you my wife." But looking at the bloody letter, a terrifying realization gripped my heart. If I stayed hidden while my family and the queen were butchered, my rebirth was entirely meaningless. "I cannot wait," I whispered, wiping a drop of blood from my cheek. While Nathan marched his army north, I did the exact opposite. Accompanied by Harris and Rigg, I hijacked a heavy, black iron carriage loaded with unstable alchemical explosives. I took the reins, whipping the horses into a frenzied gallop straight back toward the deadly borders of Retorand. We tore through the howling storm, entering the narrow, treacherous Blackwood Gorge. Suddenly, the pitch-black cliffs on both sides erupted in blinding torchlight. Hundreds of King Richard's elite heavy black cavalrymen appeared on the ridges. With a synchronized, terrifying war cry, the massive wall of armored horsemen charged down the steep slopes, ready to grind our carriage into a bloody pulp. The very earth violently quaked as hundreds of heavily armored black cavalrymen cascaded down the steep ravine walls like a mechanical avalanche. I kicked open the roof hatch of the carriage, the freezing wind whipping my hair. Without a second of hesitation, I pulled the pins on 3 high-yield alchemical grenades and hurled them flawlessly into the structural fissures of the cliff face above the charging army. Boom, boom! The deafening chain of explosions entirely vaporized the rock wall. Thousands of tons of jagged boulders and mud rained down, instantly crushing dozens of the leading horses and riders into unrecognizable paste. Rigg drifted the heavy carriage wildly, the iron-rimmed wheels shooting sparks as they skidded along the very edge of a 200-foot vertical drop. But the surviving enemy crossbowmen had already locked onto us. A heavy barbed steel bolt tore through the howling wind, driving straight through the neck of our lead horse. The massive beast collapsed in a spray of blood. The carriage violently flipped, the axle screaming as it shattered. Seeing the carriage sliding unstoppably toward the cliff edge, Rigg drew his saber, severed the hitch, and miraculously leapt onto a surviving horse. "I will tell Nathan!" he roared, disappearing into the storm. Gravity claimed us. The heavy iron carriage tipped over the edge, and Harris and I plummeted straight down into the terrifying, bottomless black abyss of the gorge. The grappling hook bit viciously into the rock face, jerking our falling bodies before we smashed straight through the skylight of my border safe house. I rolled across the floorboards, my skin bleeding from a dozen glass cuts. My lungs burning, exhausted and dehydrated, I reached for a teacup on the desk. "Do not drink that." My cousin Henry lunged across the room like a madman, slapping the cup from my hand. The dark tea splattered across a rug. Within seconds, the liquid melted through the thick wool, burning a hole into the floorboards while releasing a toxic vapor. Henry's face was drained of color. "That is glatt leaf extract. 1 drop causes agonizing paralysis." My mind raced, the puzzle pieces clicking together. Glatt leaf was a rare poison. Only Edie had the connections to procure it. The blood-soaked letter from my maid was a flawless forgery. The queen wasn't imprisoned. Edie had fabricated the entire crisis to lure me back for an assassination. "I am going to cut her throat," I snarled, drawing my twin daggers and charging toward the door. But when I yanked the handle, an explosive tripwire detonated. A thick cloud of hallucinogenic gas blasted directly into my face, instantly plunging my world into darkness. A bucket of freezing, foul-smelling water violently splashed across my face, snapping me back to agonizing reality. The terrifying rattle of heavy iron chains echoed as I realized my wrists and ankles were bolted to a rusted, blood-stained chair. We were deep inside an underground dungeon, the air thick with rotting flesh. A chilling, psychotic giggle echoed from the shadows. A pair of red velvet heels stepped into the dim torchlight. Edie. Her once beautiful face was partially covered by a black silk veil to hide her burn scars, but she walked toward me like a victorious queen, casually twirling a serrated dagger glowing with sickening green venom. "You finally fell into my trap, sister?" she mocked, her face twisting into a hideous mask of triumph. Unable to hold back her bloated ego, she aggressively grabbed my chin and spat out the disgusting truth. She was my biological father's illegitimate bastard. Every single torment she orchestrated was a calculated plot to steal my status, wealth, and fiancé. She slowly pressed the poisoned, jagged blade directly against my carotid artery. A thin trickle of warm blood slid down my pale neck. One little push, "And your perfect life belongs entirely to me," she hissed. Instead of crying or begging for mercy, I let my head drop slightly forward. Then, from the absolute depths of my lungs, I unleashed a low, dark, and utterly psychotic burst of laughter that violently shook the damp walls of the dungeon. "What are you laughing at? You are about to die!" Edie shrieked. her hand trembling so violently that the venomous blade sliced another millimeter into my flesh. I snapped my head up, my eyes locking onto hers with the predatory intensity of a starving wolf. "I am laughing because you are a pathetic, brainless pig," I spat, my voice echoing off the stone walls. "You think you outsmarted me? You are nothing but a disposable rag King Richard is using to wipe up his mess." I didn't give her a second to process. I aggressively laid out the brutal truth. The bandits she hired were actually the king's elite royal death squad. The tyrant weaponized her pathetic jealousy to assassinate Prince Nathan and kidnap me simultaneously. The moment her task was complete, the king would publicly pin the treason on her and send her directly to the guillotine. The unscarred half of Edie's face turned the color of chalk. "No, I am going to be the crown princess," she stammered, dropping the dagger. She turned around slowly. The masked mercenaries standing in the shadows were already drawing their heavy military sabers, their eyes locking onto her with cold, mechanical killing intent. They were going to slaughter us both. Just as the lead assassin raised his sword to decapitate her, the massive stone ceiling above us emitted a deafening, structural groan. With a catastrophic explosion of collapsing granite, the entire roof violently caved in. Hundreds of tons of pulverized granite and blinding dust violently cascaded into the dungeon, accompanied by a deafening roar. Through the thick cloud of destruction, a terrifying figure descended like a god of war. Queen Anna landed directly on the rubble, wielding a massive, smoking alchemical musket. Without a word of hesitation, she pulled the trigger, blasting the lead assassin's head into a spray of red mist. "Who dares touch my daughter?" The queen's roar shook the very foundations of the earth. Before the remaining mercenaries could even raise their swords, Harris dropped from the ceiling opening. The impeccably dressed butler didn't use a weapon. He became one. He surged into the assassins, his fists breaking ribs and shattering skulls with sickening, percussive crunches. In less than 10 seconds, the king's elite killers were reduced to broken meat. Edie shrieked in absolute terror, trying to crawl away into the shadows. Harris casually stepped forward and delivered a brutal kick to her ribs, sending her flying into the iron bars. She coughed up a massive puddle of blood. The iron chains binding me were swiftly severed. I collapsed into Queen Anna's warm, trembling embrace. I looked at Edie writhing in the dirt like a crushed insect, my eyes completely devoid of mercy. "Throw her into the deepest black cell," I commanded the royal guards. "Now bring me a horse. I am going to end the king's reign tonight." Midnight cloaked the desolate border fortress bedchamber as King Richard arrogantly swirled his crimson wine, eagerly awaiting the glorious news of my brutal assassination. Suddenly, the warm orange flames crackling in his massive fireplace erupted into a blinding, toxic blue. A suffocating cloud of alchemical sleep gas instantly flooded the room. Before the supreme tyrant could even shout for his guards, his eyes rolled back, and his body slumped pathetically onto his golden throne. When the king finally choked awake, his head pounding with agonizing pain, he realized the room was silent, his elite guards were gone. I sat across from him, my ruined dress stained with dirt and dried blood. I looked like a demon crawling out of the abyss. With a flick of my wrists, 2 poisoned throwing knives whistled through the air, embedding themselves deeply into the mahogany wood mere inches from his ears, cutting off several strands of his royal hair. "You arrogant traitor!" the king roared, trying to mask his terror. "I can crush you with a single command." I ignored his pathetic bluster. I stood up and slammed 3 heavy, iron-bound files onto his desk with bone-rattling force. I leaned over, pressing a razor-sharp short sword against his trembling throat. "File 1, my absolute monopoly over your empire's economy. File 2, the lethal blackmail of your entire cabinet. File 3, the exact compromised locations of your border armies." I whispered venomously. Looking at the papers, the king's pupils dilated in absolute apocalyptic despair. "This is impossible. How did you acquire these?" the supreme tyrant stammered, his absolute arrogance shattering into microscopic fragments. Cold sweat poured down King Richard's face, completely soaking his royal robes. He was staring at the undeniable proof that his mighty empire was entirely within my grip. The blade of my short sword pressed harder, drawing a bead of blood from his neck. "If I give the command," I whispered, my voice dripping with lethal malice, "the Telendrian army and the starving peasants of your own streets will burn you and your pathetic iron throne to ashes by sunrise." The once invincible monarch whimpered like a beaten dog. His hands shook violently as he grabbed a quill and signed his name on the magical, binding treaty, officially surrendering all authority over my family and my territory forever. I sheathed my blade, turned my back on his ruined dignity, and kicked open the fortress doors. The first brilliant rays of dawn washed over my blood-stained gown. Suddenly, a falcon shrieked from the sky, dropping a desperately rushed military scroll into my hands. My heart violently seized. It was a frontline report from Rig. The scene flashed into my mind. Nathan, his silver armor completely painted in blood, kneeling amidst a terrifying mountain of slaughtered enemy corpses at the border gorge. I sprinted toward the courtyard, vaulting onto the fastest warhorse available. I kicked the stirrups violently, charging straight into the howling winds. "Wait for me, Nathan!" Boom! My warhorse trampled through the towering wall of alchemical fire blocking the gorge entrance. Charred earth and severed limbs flew under the iron-shod hooves. Through the thick, choking, bloody smoke, I spotted Nathan. His once gleaming mithril armor was dyed a terrifying, oxidized red, just as a surviving high-tier assassin raised a poisoned broadsword to ambush him from the shadows. I threw my weight off the saddle. 2 throwing knives shrieked past Nathan's ears, perfectly piercing the assassin's skull. "Nathan!" I screamed, my boots splashing into the ankle-deep mud and blood as I sprinted toward him. He snapped his head around. The apocalyptic, bloodthirsty frenzy in his golden eyes instantly melted into profound vulnerability the second he saw my face. He dropped his notched, heavy broadsword and stumbled forward, his massive frame collapsing to his knees right in front of me. He buried his face into my ruined, blood-stained skirts, his chest heaving violently. I frantically touched his soot-covered face, terrified he had sustained a fatal wound. But instead of coughing up blood, Nathan slowly lifted his head from the mountain of corpses. With trembling, heavily bruised fingers, he reached beneath his violently battered chest plate. He carefully pulled out a folded parchment envelope, soaked in his own blood but immaculately preserved, and held it up directly to my face. I aggressively snatched the blood-soaked envelope from his trembling fingers and tore it open. Written in Nathan's bold, frantic handwriting was a single vow. "If I survive this slaughter, I will offer my entire empire to ask for your hand." The freezing storm whipped the ashes of the battlefield around us. Nathan knelt in the puddle of gore, tightly gripping my gunpowder-stained hands. His voice was hoarse, yet it echoed like thunder in the dead valley. "Liana, marry me. Be my bride, be my absolute queen." The suffocating terror of my past life freezing to death, my deep-rooted phobia of love, was instantly obliterated by this barbaric, unapologetic devotion. Tears finally broke through my cold facade. I violently grabbed the collar of his ruined armor, hauling his face up to mine, and delivered a deeply aggressive, blood-tasting kiss right amidst the roaring alchemical flames. "I accept," I whispered against his lips, flashing a demonic, predatory smile. "But before I wear your crown, I must return to the capital and incinerate the leeches feeding on my family's rotting corpse." Days later, my warhorse violently kicked open the gilded iron gates of the Duchy of Armont. I rode straight into the courtyard, only to find my biological mother, Sylvia, frantically ordering terrified servants to load massive crates of solid gold bricks into a getaway carriage. Crash! I ruthlessly kicked the solid gold-trimmed chest, sending it splintering into pieces. Hundreds of glittering gold coins exploded like shrapnel, pelting directly into Sylvia's heavily powdered face. She shrieked in shock. Then her features contorted into a venomous snarl as she whipped out a barbed leather riding crop. "You worthless wretch! You dare return? I am taking my rightful fortune." The moment her whip lashed through the rainy air, I lunged forward and grabbed the spiked leather barehanded. Ignoring the warm blood dripping from my sliced palm, I violently yanked the whip backward. The massive kinetic force launched Sylvia off her feet, slamming her heavily onto the scattered gold coins. I pinned her chest down beneath my heavy riding boot. "Open your greedy eyes," I roared, slamming a stack of red-stamped guild contracts directly into her screaming mouth. "This entire estate, right down to the silk corset you are wearing, has been fully mortgaged to my prosperity guild. You are completely destitute," the arrogant aristocrat instantly broke. Sobbing and desperately hugging my muddy boots, I coldly signaled Harris, who mercilessly stripped her of her lavish jewels and threw her out into the freezing, torrential rain like garbage. Suddenly, a sharp smack echoed behind me. My biological father, the Duke, emerged from the shadows, raising his hand to strike my face. "You ungrateful monster. How dare you treat your mother?" The Duke's descending palm was violently clamped in my grip like a steel vice. With a vicious twist, a sickening crack echoed through the courtyard as I dislocated his wrist. The cowardly patriarch unleashed a deafening, pig-like squeal. I seamlessly drew a heavy steel dagger from my belt. Thwack! I drove the blade forcefully through a thick parchment scroll, pinning it deeply into the mahogany pillar barely half an inch from his ear. A lock of his graying hair drifted to the floor. Sign this immediately, or I will hand the royal auditors the absolute proof of your military embezzlement, I commanded, my eyes radiating an apocalyptic, sub-zero chill. This was the pathetic man who had coldly watched me starve to death in my past life. Now crushed beneath my suffocating killing intent, he trembled violently, a dark stain of urine spreading down his expensive silk trousers. Shaking uncontrollably, he signed his trembling signature in his own blood onto the absolute transfer of his ducal title. I yanked the dagger from the wood, watching the utterly broken man crawl out of the estate gates on his hands and knees. The toxic chains of my bloodline were finally severed. I turned to Harris, wiping the blood from my blade. Prepare a fresh horse. It is time to visit my sweet sister in the royal black dungeon, deep underground. The agonizing screech of dragging iron chains echoed through the suffocating darkness. Clang! My crystal stilettos echoed like gunshots as I stepped into the putrid, blood-flooded lowest level of the royal black dungeon. I wore an opulent dark purple velvet gown, a stark contrast to the absolute misery around me. Edie was covered in aggressive rats, her wrists chained to the weeping stone wall. Seeing me, she lunged at the rusted iron bars like a rabid beast, the metal collar choking her bleeding neck. Why are you here? Get out! She shrieked hysterically. I am still the future queen! Rowan is bringing his army to rescue me. Looking at this pathetic, delusional stray dog, I didn't feel anger, only a twisted, condescending amusement. I ordered Harris to kick a bowl of rancid, maggot-infested slop toward her cage. I leaned close to the bars, whispering the lethal truth with a venomous smile. Stop dreaming. I have completely severed King Richard's economic lifelines. Your precious kingdom is bankrupt. As for your beloved fiancé, I slapped a wax-sealed royal execution order directly against her dirty face. He blamed every single assassination attempt on you. He is coming here right now to execute you himself. Edie's pupils vibrated with pure, apocalyptic terror as she tore at her own hair. No, he loves me! Before she could finish her scream, the heavy thud of military boots echoed down the corridor. Rowan emerged into the torchlight, looking like a deranged ghoul, clutching a glowing green poison dagger. You miserable whore! You ruined my entire life! Rowan roared, completely oblivious to me standing in the shadows. The ruined crown prince lunged at the iron bars like a rabid bull, shoving his arms through the gaps to violently strangle Edie's neck. If you hadn't manipulated me into breaking my engagement, Talendria's limitless wealth would be mine. You made me the laughingstock of the continent. Choking on her own blood, Edie's primal survival instinct ignited. She snapped her jaw shut, sinking her teeth viciously into Rowan's forearm and tearing away a chunk of flesh. Rowan screamed in sheer agony. He retaliated instantly, driving the venomous green dagger deeply into her shoulder. The two former soulmates violently cursed and mutilated each other through the rusted cage. In the face of lost power and impending death, their so-called eternal love shattered into pathetic, bloody garbage. I slowly stepped out of the darkness. Hearing the sharp click of my heels, the two bleeding monsters instantly froze. Seeing my majestic, untouchable aura, Rowan practically collapsed to his knees. He shoved his bleeding hands through the bars, desperately grabbing the hem of my velvet dress. Liana, I was wrong. I will kiss your boots. Just save me, he begged. I disgustedly crushed his broken fingers beneath my stiletto and turned away. As I stepped out of the dungeon, the deep-sea sapphire necklace resting against my collarbone suddenly erupted in a blinding, blood-red magical aura. Boom. The explosive crimson light shooting from the sapphire violently pierced the stone ceiling, seemingly freezing time and space itself. Queen Anna sprinted recklessly down the grand corridor, wrapping me in a desperate, crushing embrace. Her trembling fingers brushed the searing hot gemstone as tears streamed down her regal face. The magic answered. The wish I traded my life for actually came true. Within the blinding magical halo, a breathtaking holographic memory violently projected into the air, making my heart completely stop. It showed my past life. Queen Anna lay on her deathbed, violently coughing up black blood after Edie poisoned her. When a guard whispered that I had frozen to death in the streets, the queen let out an agonizing, soul-tearing scream. She gripped this exact ancestral necklace, an artifact that granted one miracle at the absolute cost of the caster's soul. If time can be reversed, the dying queen wept in the projection. Let my daughter Liana live. Let her have everything. The fractured memories of my past life violently realigned. I hadn't been reborn by mere chance. This fierce, unrelated woman had literally burned her own soul to incinerate my tragic fate. I collapsed into Queen Anna's arms, sobbing uncontrollably as I screamed the word I had suppressed for 2 lifetimes. Mother! Just as we shared this profoundly shattering reunion, a deafening explosion ripped through the air. The palace's massive glass dome shattered completely, raining down dozens of black-clad assassins. Countless razor-sharp grappling hooks tore through the howling wind. Aiming directly for my skull, I violently shoved Queen Anna to safety and instantly drew my twin daggers, seamlessly slicing the throats of the first 3 descending assassins. However, these were the king's ultimate berserkers. Injected with volatile alchemical rage serums, they completely ignored their lethal wounds. A towering, 7-foot behemoth roared like a beast, raising a massive steel broadsword to split my head in half. Just as the crushing blade hovered an inch from my face, a demonic, primordial roar shattered the hallway windows. "Get away from her!" Nathan launched himself into the corridor like a living cannonball. The exact second he saw me in mortal danger, a suppressed fragment of his own soul violently awakened. The agonizing past-life memory of discovering my frozen, lifeless corpse in the snow. The absolute despair of his past failure merged with his present fury. His guilt mutated into an apocalyptic, terrifying, slaughtering power. Nathan went completely berserk. He thrust his bare, bleeding hand forward and physically caught the descending giant broadsword. With a sickening screech of metal, he squeezed his fist, entirely crushing the heavy steel blade into twisted shrapnel. He became a soulless engine of death, violently ripping the berserkers apart limb from limb. Standing atop a mountain of mutilated corpses, his golden eyes burned crimson. "Liana," he panted, his voice trembling with terrifying devotion. "This time, I made it." Suddenly, a deafening toll from the high palace bell tower interrupted us. Accompanying the deafening death knell, 50 of the king's elite royal heavy crossbow snipers crouched on the palace roof, drawing their bowstrings to maximum tension. They were preparing to unleash an indiscriminate, armor-piercing volley into the courtyard to massacre us all. Just before the lethal shower could launch, a sharp, piercing whistle tore through the night sky. A pure silver serving tray, aggressively sharpened to a razor's edge, spun through the air like a flying guillotine. It cleanly severed the throats of the 3 lead snipers, sending a massive fountain of arterial blood spraying into the clouds. Making such an uncivilized racket while my master is present is profoundly rude, Butler Harris announced. He stood elegantly balanced on the icy gargoyle, meticulously wiping fresh blood from his pristine white gloves. Simultaneously, Rig, the Shadow Rat King, vaulted out from a massive stone chimney, his scarred hands blurred at impossible speeds, deploying a nearly invisible, highly lethal alchemical wire net across the roof tiles. The panicked snipers instinctively scrambled backward, only to be seamlessly sliced into bloody chunks the moment they touched the razor wire grid. Within 60 seconds, the continent's 2 most terrifying men stood back to back, completely annihilating the king's final trump card. Rig casually kicked the last sniper's corpse off the high roof, flipping a disrespectful middle finger toward the king's tower. Deep within that very tower, King Richard sat on his throne, his hands convulsing as he held a blood-stained emergency report. "Report!" a terrified royal messenger screamed, tumbling into the throne room and smashing his knees against the marble. "Your Majesty, the Prosperity Guild has completely severed our national grain and potion supplies. Every aristocratic bank simultaneously declared bankruptcy and was absorbed. Our imperial treasury, it does not hold a single copper coin." This apocalyptic announcement slammed into King Richard's chest like a billion-ton warhammer. "No, I refuse to believe it!" the absolute tyrant roared, his bloodshot eyes bulging from his skull. "I am the divine ruler! I cannot be overthrown by a wretched merchant girl!" He aggressively shredded the military report, gripping his sword to execute the messenger. But the moment he stood up, the catastrophic stress, combined with the lingering effects of the alchemical sleep gas I had previously poisoned him with, triggered a lethal biological backlash. Ugh! King Richard arched his back, violently spewing a massive fountain of thick, necrotic black blood into the air. The foul mist permanently stained his sacred iron throne. His knees buckled entirely. He collapsed onto the cold stone like a sack of rotting meat. The priceless pure gold crown slipped from his dying head, rolling through the sticky puddle of his own blood, echoing the final pathetic death knell of his empire. A month later, 1,000 miles away in the grand capital square of Telendria, the deafening cheers of 100,000 citizens were setting the stage for a world-shaking coronation. On the pristine white marble steps of the Grand Telendrian Cathedral, Lady Rose's father, the powerful old duke, blocked the entrance with 50 heavily armed conservative nobles. "A ruined, foreign merchant girl has absolutely no right to sit on the Telendrian throne," the old duke roared, aggressively drawing his broadsword. "Even if blood stains these holy steps, we will never submit to her rule." I slowly stepped out of my carriage, wearing a seemingly simple yet devastatingly expensive dark gold gown. I didn't even blink at their drawn steel. When Nathan furiously reached for his sword to slaughter them, I gently pressed his wrist down. I raised my hand and snapped my fingers with a sharp, echoing crack. If you insist on discussing qualifications, let us speak a language you actually understand, I sneered coldly. Rumble! Over 100 massive reinforced iron transport carriages, pulled by purebred warhorses, violently smashed through the plaza barricades. The iron gates of the carriages dropped simultaneously, a literal blinding waterfall of solid gold bricks, ultra-rare magical ores, and the supreme debt deeds of every protesting noble violently crashed onto the Duke's boots. I didn't climb up to your royal family, I announced, my voice radiating absolute, crushing dominance. I am simply buying your entire country. Does anyone else object? The blinding glare of the gold shattered their pride. Every single noble instantly dropped to their knees in sheer terror. But inside my dressing room, a darker threat was silently ticking. Tick, tick. In the ultra-luxurious bridal dressing room at the absolute top of the cathedral, a massive silver music box hidden among the wedding gifts suddenly emitted a violent, high-frequency magical screech. My maid had just adjusted the crown on my head when we saw it. Glowing red alchemical runes pulsed frantically across the silver metal. It was a massive bomb, and we had exactly 3 seconds before the entire tower was vaporized into ash. Bomb, protect the queen! The royal guards shrieked, scrambling blindly in absolute panic. In that microsecond between life and death, Butler Harris exploded through the oak doors like a shadow-clad lightning bolt. He didn't hesitate for a fraction of a second. He aggressively grabbed the scorching, melting alchemical bomb with his bare hands, spun with terrifying physical torque, and hurled it like a cannonball straight toward the massive, 50-foot stained glass window. Boom! The apocalyptic explosion detonated just outside the cathedral walls. The terrifying shockwave instantly shattered the colossal stained glass window. Millions of colorful glass shards, mixed with the shredded petals of 1,000 red roses, rained down into the room like a breathtaking, deadly diamond storm. I remained perfectly still at my vanity, letting the sparkling destruction cascade over my ultimate galaxy-woven starlight wedding dress. I slowly opened my icy, dominant eyes and straightened my crown. The tyrant's final dying breath. I coldly smirked. Let us go get married. The colossal, ancient cathedral doors groaned as they slowly began to open. Dong, dong, the solemn, earth-shaking toll of the royal wedding bells echoed as the 100-foot-tall cathedral doors violently swung open. I linked my arm with Rig, who had abandoned his shadowy rags for an immaculate tuxedo to walk me down the aisle. We stepped onto an impossibly lavish crimson carpet entirely paved with millions of crushed, glittering rubies. Thousands of enchanted candles floated gracefully in the air, casting a divine fiery glow over my majestic entrance. Every single Telendrian aristocrat, including the fiercely arrogant conservative dukes, deeply bowed their heads, entirely too terrified to look directly at my blinding radiance. Sitting in the front row, Queen Anna wept tears of absolute joy. Standing at the towering marble altar was Nathaniel. Draped in an intimidating dark gold emperor's battle mantle, his usual gentle demeanor was entirely eradicated. He looked like an apocalyptic war god, his golden eyes radiating an aggressively possessive, burning obsession as he extended his hand toward me. I confidently crushed the rubies beneath my heels, ascending to my throne and my equal. Just as the High Bishop raised his golden staff to initiate the sacred vows, a sickeningly discordant crash shattered the holy silence. The heavy side doors were aggressively rammed open by a horrific, skeletal figure covered in rotting feces and foul mud. He wildly swung a rusted, jagged iron blade, unleashing a shrill, completely psychotic howl. No, she belongs to me. Liana is mine. The deranged, filthy monster was none other than Rowan. Rowan charged wildly toward the sacred altar like a rabid stray dog, desperately thrusting his rusted blade toward my pristine wedding dress. I didn't even blink, nor did I pause my majestic stride for a microsecond. The moment his filthy boots touched the ruby carpet, 3 terrifying shadows exploded from the aristocratic crowd. Smash! A deafening, bone-shattering collision echoed through the holy hall. Harris, Rig, and even Queen Anna, in her heavy corseted gown, acted with flawless synchronization. They simultaneously delivered brutal kicks directly into Rowan's frail chest. The explosive kinetic force instantly pulverized his ribs. The former crown prince folded entirely in half, vomiting black acid as he was launched backward like a broken rag doll. He flew straight out the towering cathedral doors, bouncing brutally down the 100 marble steps outside with a series of agonizing shrieks. Slam! The massive oak doors were instantly slammed shut by the royal guards. Drag his broken body back to the Redoran dungeon and chain him to Edie forever, I commanded, completely sealing that pathetic clown out of my universe. From beginning to end, I never once turned my head to look at the man who caused my agonizing death in my past life. He was entirely irrelevant. I simply locked my gaze on Nathaniel, a breathtakingly gorgeous, predatory smile curling my lips. "Where were we?" I whispered elegantly. Hearing my absolute dismissal of his rival, Nathan's obsessive love ignited into a blinding, world-consuming inferno. Nathan pulled me against his armored chest, his strong arm tightly crushing my waist as he ruthlessly slid an impossibly massive, magical diamond ring onto my finger. "I love you." His voice vibrated with raw, absolute dominance. "In this life and every life after, my empire, my sword and my soul belong entirely to you, and mine to you," I whispered. I aggressively grabbed his jaw, pulling him into a deeply passionate, territory-claiming kiss right in front of the entire continent. Boom! Thousands of magnificent alchemical fireworks simultaneously detonated outside the cathedral, illuminating the night skies of both empires with blinding, victorious gold. My mind briefly flashed to the absolute ruin of my enemies. In a putrid dungeon, a completely insane Rowan and a horribly disfigured Edie were chained together, violently biting and clawing each other in eternal, rabid agony. King Richard had already rotted away on a cold stone floor, his eyes bulging in ultimate despair. The flashback shattered. Nathan and I walked up the dais, simultaneously taking our seats upon the massive, twin pure gold thrones that ruled the continent. I glanced at the glowing deep-sea sapphire against my collarbone, then looked up, my icy, profoundly ambitious eyes sweeping over the vast sea of trembling aristocrats. I seductively stroked the cold golden armrest, flashing my signature, chillingly beautiful smirk. "I told you I was never a weak princess. I am just a ruthless businesswoman who enjoys hostile takeovers."